I'm here to answer questions that some people might have on the debate on the water bill yesterday. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay. What would you say in response to some of the criticism that has been leveled about the legislation that was put forward on water?
Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to hearing thoughtful feedback from all parties about how we can ensure this bill is as strong as possible to get to its goal. And the goal is to make sure that we never return to where we were in 2015 with 105 long-term boil water advisories and insufficient funding across the country, not just for the infrastructure that First Nations needed, but for the ongoing operations. In fact, it was shocking to me to find out as the Minister of Indigenous Services that in those days, the disparity between funding for water operations on First Nation and in a similar sized municipality was such that not only could people not attract people to those positions, but once they had them, they had a hard time retaining them. So we've done a lot of that work to ensure equity in terms of access to training and funding for operations and investing the billions of dollars to build or renovate plants. But we can never go back to that place, and that's the intent of this legislation.
Do you have any internal projections on when drinking water advisories may be eliminated? I know this is a process that has to happen with First Nations, but it was the Liberal government that made a promise that, of course, was passed some time ago. What's the internal timeline now on when these might be able to be lifted?
Well, the majority of long-term boil water advisories are either in the construction phase or waiting for the confidence of Chief and Council that the community is ready for the lift. And that is a process that happens by First Nations in consultation with their community members. There are a few that are still determining the best path forward. They have, for example, very spread out First Nations that are close to municipalities considering whether they should tap into municipal waterworks versus building their own plant. But those are in the 2 or 3 kind of number of communities. So we're well on our way. But it is difficult to provide a date because this is work in terms of determining when a community has confidence that has to be done by the First Nation. Last thing I'll say on this is that it is about a relationship and the certainty that many chiefs want to feel through legislation like this, that the funding will be ongoing so that communities don't find themselves in a bind in years to come.
When you say it's hard to state a date, was it a mistake for the government to have stated a date before?
I don't think so, and we weren't the government when we made that commitment.
Sure. Justin Trudeau's election promise that turned into his promise when he was leading the government. So,
right, but what I'll say is that as a party campaigning to be the government, oftentimes a party may not know the full implications of what it takes to lift. So was it a mistake? No. It was an important goal for the country to have, that in fact nobody could go on conceiving that people could live in communities without fresh water. Without making that public commitment, I think that we would have lost an opportunity. And in fact, I'm very proud of that commitment, and I will continue to work, as you know, as a minister, and along with partners in First Nations and municipal partners and provincial partners to make sure that we never go back to those times. And that's the point of this bill. This is the final piece to making sure that commitment isn't limited to a Liberal government, but actually holds the country of Canada to account for equity in water delivery services.
One of the things you said in your speech yesterday is that Treaty 7 chiefs were able to get some points that they had wanted or concerns they had addressed before the bill went tabled last December. However, there has been a lot of controversy with the idea of consultation amongst First Nations. I know that chiefs in Treaties 6, 7, and 8 have actually had a lot of opposition to the bill and to AFNs, saying they have not been they do not recognize their leadership, or maybe not their leadership, but they don't recognize them as representing them. So I'm just wondering, has this changed? The fact that Treaty 7 is saying that they're now on board with the bill, does this change the relationship you have with other treaties out west in regards to the bill?
When I was visiting with Treaty 6, 7, and 8 last couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I made a commitment to come back to have a table with Treaty 6, 7, and 8, not just to talk about water, but the many other issues that affect First Nations in the west part of our country. And you're right, First Nations in Treaty 6, 7, and 8, many of them say they don't feel represented through the process of AFN. And the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People says that Indigenous people have the right to organize themselves in whatever way they choose. And so I think that this is an opportunity to work more closely with those regions in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that gives them comfort that their thoughts and their desires in terms of legislation, in terms of funding, in terms of relationship, actually is embedded in the way that the Government of Canada works. So that table is being set up, and it will be an ongoing, regular meeting between me and elected officials. However, our department has been working closely with their officials as well.
Are these, for example, changes that we might see before the bill hits to committee, or are these things that are going to happen during the committee debate process?
I think the committee will have a very important role in making sure that they hear from a number of different witnesses, including First Nations from Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and I'm sure they'll be interested in hearing those perspectives. One thing that has come up is people's worry about the strength of the bill as it pertains to source water. So source water, once it's contaminated, in some cases can't be cleaned. And so, for example, a community like Tataswiak in northern Manitoba who has a poisoned lake, I spoke about it in my speech, that community lives literally on the shores of that lake. They walk by that lake every day. They can no longer swim in that lake. They can't draw their water from that lake. So it's broader than, obviously, drinking water. It's deeply emotional. And so I think one of the things that I've heard loud and clear is, does this bill go far enough to hold provinces and territories to account to protect that source water? And I'll look forward to reflections on what's proposed in the bill. Obviously, this is work we have to do in partnership with provinces and territories, but I'm always interested in how we strengthen that bill to make sure it reaches its goal.
Can you just elaborate on MP Wah's comments yesterday during the debate, please?
I would love to. You know, I was quite surprised. There is a saying, some of you will know, people tell you who they are, believe them. And so the first question coming from the Conservative side of the benches really illustrated the kinds of harmful stereotypes that First Nations have been living with for a very long time, implying that First Nations are destroying their own infrastructure, implying that First Nations don't have the skills or the dignity or the capacity to be able to run their own water treatment plants. And quite frankly, those stereotypes don't deserve really airing in the House of Commons. And I was quick to remind the Conservative Party that all across this country, First Nations have complex infrastructure that Indigenous water operators are running. In fact, I hold the department holds a water operators award process every year, and the number of nominees for incredible water operators and other water technicians, it's just astounding to see the talent out there and the determination of communities.
Now, he is correct in saying that there was 2 water treatment plants that did burn to the ground in the last few years. I checked it, and that I think one was Carry the Kettle First Nation. There's another one that does come to mind. But what was it that he said that you thought was perhaps not accurate about those comments?
Well, the implication that people would burn water treatment plants out of spite, out of anger at the government, out of a sense of, wanton destruction, I think, came through loud and clear in his comments. And I will just say that we see acts of arson in non-Indigenous communities as well. So there is a stereotype that somehow Indigenous people don't take care of the equipment or their housing or their community infrastructure, and that is a long-standing, very harmful and hurtful stereotype. It's not appropriate to begin the debate on a piece of legislation that's intended to restore inherent rights to drinking water with a stereotype like that. And I wanted to really call the Conservatives' attention to the substance of the bill and looking at what it is that we need to talk about to make sure this bill reaches its intended goal.
Will you ask him to withdraw his comments?
That is something I hadn't considered. I was pretty vigorous in my rebuttal of his assertions, but it's something I'll reflect on and talk to my House leader. Thank you very much.
Bonjour tout le monde, vous allez bien? On a le privilège d'accueillir Jeremy Hansen, qui est, je pense, très connu maintenant des Canadiens et des Canadiennes. C'est ceux de notre génération ont connu la mission Apollo, mais là, vous allez connaître la mission Artemis. Vous connaissez aussi Jenni, qui est avec nous, nos 2 astronautes qui s'entraînent présentement à Houston. So I was just saying for Canadians watching at home, we have 2 national heroes. Both Jenni and Jeremy are inspiring the next generation of Canadians, I would say, not only young astronauts. We were with a number of Army cadets, and you could see them inspiring. And I'm privileged because I've spent time with them. And I can tell you whether we go to school, whether we go to the Kennedy Space Center, whether we go to the Johnson Space Center, this blue suit is recognized around the world as excellence, as people with courage, and obviously people who are achieving extraordinary things Both of them, they're training together. As you know, Jeremy has been selected to go on the Artemis mission, which is going to be going around the moon. Yes, we're going back to the moon, for those who have not figured that out. And Jenni is training as well as the backup Canadian astronaut that's going to go in this great mission and make our country very, very proud. So with that, we're happy to take questions. I know you probably want to hear from them more than me. You get me more often. But I think it was important for them to be with us here, to meet parliamentarians, to take questions, and also to be here with you. So with that, I'll turn over to you, and feel free to ask your question.
What about the other astronaut that was in the house?
Well, the other astronaut is a great, great colleague and friend. Believe it or not, it's not even staged. We're meeting him, but on a separate topic. We're meeting Marc Garneau, which has been inspiring generation of astronauts. But believe me or not, this was not related to this visit. It's part of another visit. Marc Garneau is the president of the Canada-Korea Chamber of Commerce, so we're going to be talking Korea after. But obviously, we celebrate Marc as a pioneer in the industry and obviously in space exploration. So with that, happy if you have questions, go ahead.
Could you update us on the state of your preparation? So we know the mission was pushed back. What are you up to these days?
You need the microphone, right?
Lots of great things going on in the Artemis program for us. We're really busy training. We did delay the mission to September 2025. That feels like it was just the right decision to make. We learned some things from Artemis I that, when you identify a risk and you can map out some science experiments that you can do to learn something you don't know and maybe buy down that risk, it's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's hard to make that decision, but I'm really proud of the leadership for just doing the right thing in this case. I think it's worth taking the time to do that. We're busy training. We're working a lot in the simulator. Jenni's been working with the mission control team, so trying to get that whole team together, making decisions. We have emergency situations, et cetera. How are we going to deal with them? So that's coming together. We're going out into the Pacific Ocean in February. Why don't you tell them a little bit about URT, Jenni?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be participating in something called URT, which stands for an Underway Recovery Test. And it's essentially an opportunity for us to practice with recovery forces that would pick the capsule up after it returns from its amazing flyby around the moon, enters Earth's atmosphere and lands in the Pacific Ocean. What's the choreography and the plan and the execution for the teams that recover the crew and the capsule following that? And the key to success in any event, spaceflight is no different, is preparation and practice. So we'll be out on a Navy ship in the Pacific Ocean with the recovery team practicing what it's like when we come back. And just like Jeremy says, we're busy. We just keep working on preparation and getting ready to go, and it just gives us more time to learn everything we need and make the most of the opportunity that Canada has with this incredible groundbreaking mission, bring that back to Canadians, and prepare to eventually go back to the moon and beyond.
I want to add one more thing to what we're doing this week, which is back in Canada and sharing the inspiration of the Artemis missions with Canadians, meeting with a lot of young Canadians and with media, leveraging your expertise to help share what's happening here. But the main message really comes down to, why is a Canadian flying on this mission? Why is Canada the second country in the world to send a human into deep space? This traces back to decades to decisions that this country has made, very bold, pioneering decisions, courageous decisions, strategic investments, to the point where at this time we now have the capacity, the extraordinary capacity and talents in our country to deliver in space on the world stage. Our partners want us alongside of them. And it comes down to strategic decisions that have been made in the last number of years. And what we want to do is just reflect that back to Canadians. Sometimes we keep ourselves too small. When we travel around this country and we're just so proud of the people we run into, the talents they have, the abilities, and we're just like, we just got to be bold. We can bring real value to the world stage. You're talking to young children, they're paying attention to the same things we are. The world is not doing well right now. We're not doing as well as we could as a human race. They're worried about things like climate change. They're worried about us getting along. Artemis isn't going to fix all that. But we hope during the Artemis II mission that when we go around the far side of the moon and we take a picture of planet Earth and we send that back and everybody on that planet is in that picture, we just hope that people for a moment will pick up their heads and say, wow, we can do great things when we create together, we set big goals, we could overcome these huge challenges. So that's what this is really about.
Vous parlez en français un petit peu de cet objectif inspirationnel et de ce qui s'en vient pour vous?
Bien sûr. C'est vraiment important comme Canadien réaliser ou demander la question pourquoi on a un Canadien sur le vol qui va survoler la Lune. Et la réponse, c'est à cause des milliers de personnes qui ont pris des choix courageux, On a décidé de travailler ensemble, de fixer des grands objectifs. Et avec collaboration, on a fait des choses incroyables. Et maintenant, le Canada va être le deuxième pays au monde d'envoyer un humain dans l'espace lointain. Ça, c'est quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Et pour nous, comme Canadiens, nous sommes extrêmement fiers de nos pays et les gens dans nos pays qui font tout ça.
Can I just ask? So we obviously are used to thinking a lot about politics. I'm not going to ask you any specific political questions.
Thank you.
Don't
Thank
worry.
you.
But I do wonder how you're ambassadors for this work in a way. How do you ensure that this is something that people of all political stripes support when there is an incredible amount of money involved and a lot of people are thinking about government spending, cost of living? How do you sort of get above all of that?
Well, we always just tell the truth. But I think when you ask that question, what comes to mind for me is we understand space is more. I think people get today space is interwoven into their lives. We're using space every single day. Why? Do we have to? No, you don't have to. It's the most economic way to do things. Trying to understand your planet. Using satellites to understand climate change is the smartest way to do it. It just simply makes sense. So I think people understand that. But then, and you look at the opportunity, and we've talked about this a lot, Minister, we expect the space economy to triple between here and 2040. That's extraordinary opportunity. Everybody wants a chunk of that pie, but who's the best position to do it? Well, we happen to be among the most well-positioned in the world to take advantage of this. Is it going to fall in our lap? No. We're going to have to do what we have done for decades now, the thing I was just telling you. We're going to have to continue to make strategic investments like we have done in the past. We have a lot to celebrate. We'll have to keep doing that, but we'll have to be bold. We'll have to be courageous. And we can build a future space economy that truly supports our country, and that's the work that we're amongst doing. It's not political. I don't think it's a political aspect. I've never felt that space was political in Canada. I just feel that sometimes we take it for granted. We don't necessarily take the time, like humans just do that. We take things for granted, right, when they're just there for you. Space is just always there for you. But the reality is the people who came before all of us, they worked hard. They rolled up their sleeves, and they really got into it and built this place where we are today, and we're going to keep doing that.
Jenni, want to ask anything?
I will just add that I think that we're very fortunate in this country to have people who are very proud to be from a spacefaring nation. And they have the understanding that their daily life, as Jeremy said, is enabled by space. So whether it's looking at the effect of natural disasters on our cities, monitoring markers for climate change, the health of our forests, the health of our ice fields, looking at how we get food on the table, monitoring agriculture, navigation, communication, how we talk to each other, how we see each other, how we meet up, all of that is enabled by space. And like Jeremy says, we have that because we made bold and visionary decisions previously, and that's why Canadians value space, and we just want to continue that legacy and the understanding of how important space is for Canadians.
Last question, please.
I know that earlier this month that you virtually visited a bunch of Indigenous children over Zoom, and you mentioned that you are out visiting a lot of youth. Do you have any more intentions to visit any more Indigenous nations or any schools for youth?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this week, we're after our trip in Ottawa, we're heading to Regina. We'll be at First Nations University on Thursday, and the Turtle Lodge, who I've worked with, this is the elder who invited me to go on a vision quest, and has just done a lot of mentoring for me with respect to Indigenous knowledge, and just a very meaningful relationship for me. So he'll be there. I really appreciate the fact that he's making that effort to join me at the First Nations University. But this has been a long journey for me. I grew up as a Canadian who just didn't have proximity to Indigenous culture and Indigenous knowledge. And the more proximity I have to it now, and the more I learn, I just understand how rich it is, and I just crave more of it. And on this mission, this is a really valuable opportunity for us at the Canadian Space Agency to just strengthen that connection and to reflect back to Canadians some of the richness of those traditions that I think really have a lot to offer our country. In fact, the elder Sabe, he goes by, he's explained to me, our gifts have sort of been dismissed. He's talking about Indigenous gifts have sort of been dismissed, but they have long held that their purpose here is to bring those gifts, and that they will come and they will help us raise the entire country up, and I love that.
With these inspiring words, we have to go answer some questions on the other side. So thank you very much. Thanks for inspiring the nation. We'll just go say hello to a few folks on the other side. Merci tout le monde. À tantôt. Merci, merci.
I can quickly. Question period still.
Listen, Pierre Poilievre says it's all your fault, Minister. Did you sort of claim this issue and now he's beating you over the head with it a bit politically?
I can't begin to imagine what motivates Mr. Poilievre politically. I took note of the thousands of jobs that the Conservatives cut from CBSA and the RCMP. Cuts that we've restored. We're going to invest more in the border services and the RCMP. But the idea that the federal government alone can attack something as complex as organized crime, auto theft, and big and small communities across the country is very disingenuous. When I spoke to the police chief in York Region, when I spoke to provincial solicitors general, the only way to attack this is to have local police, provincial police working with, obviously, the RCMP and border services. You can't stop the problem by choking off the final departure point for vehicles that may have been stolen. This is a complex problem, and that's what we're going to talk about Thursday.
Can we maybe talk about that? Like at the Port of Montreal, for example, why is it that it would be such a big task to check every one of the little, cargo boxes that these vehicles are in? Why is it logistically?
First of all, they're not little cargo boxes. To say they're little cargo boxes,
big boxes.
Huge metal containers and hundreds of thousands of them, which I saw when I went to the Port of Montreal a few weeks ago. We're going to talk on Thursday about what more the CBSA can do. Obviously, the ability for technology to properly examine what's inside of all of these containers is a question that we're going to talk about. The CBSA intercepted
Prime
over
Minister,
1,000...
why didn't you let Canadians know that you invited Jaroslav Hunka to that event?
There's a lot going on here. I'm sorry I used the wrong word to describe the boxes.
And I'm heading into question period. Thank you.
No.
Why did you let Pierre Poilievre get ahead of you on this issue?
So I just want to address the shocking revelations that the invitation to the former SS soldier Jaroslav Hunka came from the Prime Minister's office. For days and weeks, Justin Trudeau threw the Speaker under the bus and refused to take any responsibility. We now know that it's the Prime Minister's office that's responsible for vetting guests for official events, especially one of such importance as the visit of the President of Ukraine. We now know that the invitation to Jaroslav Hunka came personally from the Prime Minister. The invitation was issued in such a way that it says the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, invites you to Jaroslav Hunka. There can be no doubt that Justin Trudeau knew that this individual was going to come to Ottawa for an official event with President Ukraine. He embarrassed Canada on the world stage, and he delivered a massive propaganda win to Vladimir Putin. But this isn't the first time that Justin Trudeau has helped Vladimir Putin. Justin Trudeau authorized a turbine to be having been refurbished in Montreal, to be sent to Europe so that Russia could send more gas to European countries, enriching Russia while at the same time funding his war machine. Justin Trudeau allowed detonators from Canada to be shipped and used in landmines that the Russian army uses to kill Ukrainian soldiers. And he has refused to give the help that Ukrainians have been asking for. There are 83,000 rockets that are going to be decommissioned at the cost of millions of dollars to Canadians. But our Ukrainian friends have asked for them, saying they can use them to fight back against Russia's illegal invasion. They've also asked for artillery, and Justin Trudeau has refused to ramp up production of artillery that could be used by our Ukrainian allies against the illegal invasion. So time and time again, Justin Trudeau doesn't provide Ukraine with the help it needs, and actually funds Russia's war machine with Trudeau's pro-Russia energy policy, refusing to ship Canadian clean and ethical energy to our European allies, and therefore ensuring that they stay dependent on Russian exports. Again, enriching Vladimir Putin at the cost of our allies in Europe and especially in Ukraine. Once again, Justin Trudeau shows that he can just not be trusted on the international stage. Common sense Conservatives will send our Ukrainian allies rockets and artillery shells, not carbon taxes. I'll just invite my colleague, Mr. Berthold, to make some remarks in French, and then we'll take some questions.
Merci beaucoup, Andrew. On est choqués et troublés par les révélations qui ont été rendues publiques à l'effet que l'invitation de M. Jaroslav Honka venait directement du premier ministre lui-même et non pas, comme il l'a prétendu, effrontément pendant des semaines de la part du bureau du président de la Chambre des communes. On sait que M. Trudeau a donc menti aux Canadiens. Il a essayé de faire porter tout le chapeau, tout le blâme au président de la Chambre des communes qui a finalement démissionné, qui a pris sa part des responsabilités. Mais maintenant qu'on sait que l'invitation venait directement du premier ministre lui-même, on peut le voir dans la demande d'accès à l'information, le premier ministre du Canada vous invite personnellement à une réception. Donc, l'invitation venait de son service du protocole, donc de lui-même. On se demande vraiment, est-ce que M. Trudeau va appliquer à lui-même les mêmes standards qu'il a demandé au président de la Chambre des communes, c'est-à-dire est-ce qu'il va se demander lui-même de démissionner de son poste, parce que c'est ce que ça mérite. Il n'y a eu aucune conséquence de la part que pour le premier ministre. Il s'est imposé aucune pénalité et on pense que c'est absolument nécessaire, après ces troublantes et choquantes révélations, que le premier ministre fasse ce qui est juste. D'autant plus, on s'en souvient que cette situation-là causait un embarras national, une victoire de propagande à Vladimir Poutine incroyable. Partout, ça a été dans tous les réseaux, partout sur la planète. Et ce n'était pas la première fois que Justin Trudeau donnait ce genre de victoire à Vladimir Poutine. On se rappelle qu'il a permis à Vladimir Poutine d'avoir accès à une turbine pour lui permettre de pomper davantage de gaz pour financer sa machine de guerre contre l'Ukraine. Il a envoyé des détonateurs à Vladimir Poutine qui ont servi à tuer des Ukrainiens dans des mines. Il a également refusé d'augmenter la production d'obus au Canada, qui aurait permis, et c'était une demande du président ukrainien, qui aurait permis d'aider l'Ukraine encore davantage. Puis il refuse encore aujourd'hui d'envoyer 83 000 missiles qui ne servent plus au Canada, qu'on devra payer des millions pour faire en sorte d'en disposer, mais qui ont été demandés et qui seraient très utiles à l'Ukraine dans leur guerre face à Vladimir Poutine. Donc, pour toutes ces raisons-là, on estime que Justin Trudeau a manqué à son devoir d'aider l'Ukraine. Un gouvernement conservateur va faire ce qui est juste, va appuyer ses alliés ukrainiens, va envoyer des missiles et n'imposera pas une taxe carbone sur le dos des Ukrainiens.
Pensez-vous que M. Rota devrait revenir président de la Chambre à cause de ça? C'était, comme on dit en anglais, thrown under the bus.
M. Rota a admis sa part de responsabilité. Il a fait ce qu'on s'attend d'une personne qui fait des gestes qui ne devraient pas être faits. Il a démissionné de son poste. On s'attend à ce que le premier ministre fasse preuve de la même responsabilité.
Voterez-vous en faveur de l'accord commercial avec l'Ukraine? Voterez-vous en faveur de cet accord commercial?
Cet accord commercial-là impose à l'Ukraine, qui sont venus ici, le président ukrainien est venu ici pour demander de l'aide, pour demander des missiles. Il s'est fait répondre par le premier ministre l'obligation d'inclure dans une entente de libre-échange qui existait déjà la promotion de la taxe carbone. C'est totalement inacceptable de saisir cette occasion-là d'un moment de faiblesse d'un pays qui a besoin d'aide pour tenter d'imposer son programme idéologique. Donc, effectivement, ce programme-là, on ne peut pas supporter un accord de libre-échange avec l'Ukraine qui va imposer une taxe carbone et qui n'aidera pas l'Ukraine à faire face à ses ennemis russes.
Mr. Scheer, how concerned are you that your party's position on the implementation of the free trade agreement will hurt your credibility with Ukrainian communities in Canada?
We have a very strong message to Ukrainian Canadians and our Ukrainian allies. That is, we will send Ukraine artillery and rockets, not carbon taxes. There is a provision in the free trade deal that states the parties shall cooperate bilaterally and international forums to promote carbon pricing. That is a carbon tax. Well, then why does it need to be put in the agreement?
Well,
and what this would mean is that should Ukraine ever decide to make a different choice, that they would be in violation of a trade deal. Why would we want to impose that on our Ukrainian friends? We'll send them rockets and artillery shells, not carbon taxes.
Are you suggesting Canada's imposing a carbon tax on Ukraine?
What I'm suggesting is I'm not just suggesting, I'm reading the words that are in the trade deal. That in order for this trade deal to be implemented, Ukraine must agree to promoting a carbon tax. That is not something that we can support. There is of free trade between Canada and Ukraine already, thanks to a previous Conservative government. Conservatives will always support free trade deals that are good for Canada, but that don't include carbon tax. Thanks very much.
What are your thoughts on the free trade agreement passing? You must be happy.
The Conservatives continue to stand against Ukraine. It is inconceivable.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to say to Canadians through you that today is a really good day for Canada. It's a good day for Canada's support for Ukraine. You just saw in Parliament that we passed third reading of the Canada-Ukraine Modernized Free Trade Agreement. Every party except the Conservatives voted for this. We will stand steadfast with Ukraine. You will remember President Zelensky was here. He asked for this agreement. We negotiated this agreement in record time, in a year. And today, in this Parliament, we passed third reading. We're sending the bill to Senate. And we're going to keep working hard, standing up for Ukraine as they fight for their sovereignty, as they fight for democracy, and fighting for our democracy. Let's keep doing the work we need to do. I'm here with so many of my colleagues standing firm in support of Ukraine as we passed third reading today in Parliament.
The carbon pricing language isn't non-binding, so why even include that in the first place in this agreement?
This is an agreement negotiated by Canada and Ukraine. Ukraine has had a price on pollution since 2011. Ukraine wants to have a high standard agreement like that with Canada, with high standards for the environment, high standards on labor, innovative chapters to help small and medium-sized businesses benefit from trade. I've talked to Ukrainians, I've talked to Canadians all across Canada. You know what they're really excited to do and what they're chomping at the bit to do? To be a part of rebuilding Ukraine. This agreement is going to help them do that. And they, too, are going to want to build an economy that is green, rebuilding infrastructure that is green. But let's remember, this is an agreement negotiated by the Ukrainians and Canada, and it's a great agreement.
Does your government need to do something differently or better when it comes to bolstering Canadian support for Ukraine, to take the messaging? The poll, I know it's like only 25% of Canadians have changed their support. It's on a downswing. There's risk there. How do you address that?
I would say to Canadians, and I've met many Canadians, my colleagues represent Canadian diaspora, but Canadians who are standing in support of Ukraine as they fight for their sovereignty. Let's remember, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine almost 2 years ago. They're fighting for their sovereignty. They're fighting for the sovereignty of democracies. And Canada has stood steadfast with Ukraine all the way through in military support, in humanitarian support, here with the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Canadians want to be a part of this rebuilding effort. Ukraine is going to win this war, but we want to be ready. And doing this free trade agreement is another step at helping us not only support Ukraine, but to be ready.
It's an existential argument, though, I think. Isn't that some of the challenge, that we're talking about big things, democracy, the rule of law, the world order, when your government is also running up against more and more Canadians saying the cost of living is a problem. They need more help with these things, and wars in very faraway places are not things that they want to talk about.
Well, let's remember that when Russia invaded Ukraine, what happened? It caused food insecurity. It caused energy prices to go up. The cost of living, and it has been impacted directly, I would say, as a result of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Our government, and you have heard my colleagues in the government talk about the range of measures to help Canadians with groceries, with paying their bills. My question really is to the Conservative leader and to the Conservative Party, who is taking advice from someone who is lobbying for Loblaws. Where's their advice coming from? I know where ours is coming from. It is coming directly in response to Canadians and helping to make day-to-day life more affordable to them. And supporting Ukraine is very much a part of this.
What concerns do you have with NATO and other Western democracies seeing today's vote?
I hope that what today's vote will say to them is that Canada continues to stand steadfast. I would appeal to, as I continue and as we have continued to do, those on the opposite aisle. The Prime Minister have, over the years, been able to say to President Zelensky, Canadians stand fully behind you, because there was unanimous support for Ukraine. I think they can count on a government that will support Ukraine. And I would say to Canadians, particularly to our Conservative opposition, stand in support of Ukraine.
Question en français pour M. Baker. Les conservateurs affirment qu'ils ont voté pour C-57 parce que ça impose une taxe carbone à l'Ukraine. Qu'est-ce que vous leur répondez? Qu'est-ce que ça vous inspire?
Et ça fait pas de sens ce qu'ils disent, les conservateurs. L'Ukraine a une taxe carbone déjà en place depuis 2011. Ils ont besoin d'une taxe carbone pour entrer dans l'Union européenne. C'est une priorité pour l'Ukraine d'entrer dans l'Union européenne. Donc, les Ukrainiens ont déjà pris une décision, même avant le Canada, d'avoir une taxe carbone. C'est la première chose. Deuxièmement, il n'y a rien dans cet accord qui exige que l'Ukraine fait quoi que ce soit en ce qui concerne une taxe carbone. Donc, les arguments des conservateurs ne font pas de sens. Pour moi, ce que ça démontre, c'est que les conservateurs sont en train d'être influencés par une coalition de gens du MAGA américain qui n'appuient pas l'Ukraine. Et je pense que c'est très concernant. Je pense que les Canadiens devraient être très concernés avec ça. Nous, de notre côté, on a déjà aidé l'Ukraine. À peu près, le Canada a déjà appuyé l'Ukraine à peu près de 10 milliards de dollars, 2,5 milliards de dollars à peu près d'aide militaire, 5 milliards de dollars en ce qui concerne l'aide financière. Et on a envoyé de l'aide humanitarienne et beaucoup plus. Donc, on devrait être très fiers, on peut être très fiers comme le Canada, mais on doit appuyer les Ukrainiens jusqu'à ce qu'ils gagnent cette guerre. Et la raison que je pense que c'est important, et la ministre parlait de ça, c'est parce qu'il ne faut pas oublier que si la Russie gagne, si l'Ukraine perd, c'est un danger pour nous tous. C'est un danger pour nous tous. Si la Russie gagne, si l'Ukraine perd, c'est nous et nos alliés aux États-Unis et en Europe qui vont devoir se défendre contre l'agression de la Russie. Et donc, chaque soldat ukrainien qui se bat maintenant, c'est un soldat de moins canadien qui va devoir se battre dans le futur. Chaque dollar qu'on investit aujourd'hui, c'est des millions de dollars qu'on ne va pas devoir investir dans le futur pour protéger notre propre sécurité. Donc, je pense que c'est important qu'on se rappelle du fait que les Ukrainiens se battent non seulement pour leur propre sécurité, mais aussi pour notre sécurité. Et c'est pour ça qu'il faut qu'on se batte pour eux. Nous, de notre côté, ce gouvernement se bat pour les Ukrainiens, mais les conservateurs, évidemment, n'appuient pas l'Ukraine. Ils vont voter contre cet accord, ils ont voté contre l'aide militaire pour l'Ukraine, ils ont voté contre Operation Unifier pour la formation des Ukrainiens. C'est très clair qu'ils ont abandonné l'Ukraine. De notre côté, on va continuer à appuyer les Ukrainiens jusqu'à ce qu'ils gagnent.
Minister, just on a different matter, where do we stand with the India Free Trade Agreement? We now know that we're getting cooperation with the investigation of the Sikh activist killing in BC. What's the holdup there? There's billions of dollars on the table.
Well, I would say to Canadian businesses who are operating in India and those investors that are there that we continue to support their work, and that doesn't change at all. I would say that I'm at the negotiating table with Indonesia, I'm at the negotiating table with the ASEAN, I'm at the negotiating table with the United Kingdom. So there, we continue to do, the work of creating high-quality, excellent free trade agreements to help Canadian exporters grow into those markets. And for those businesses that are operating, and like I said, those investors that are operating in India, I continue to support them, and they continue to do that work.
That's a no to the Canada-India free trade deal, dead in the water?
I wouldn't say that, but I would say that at the moment where we've been focused on is making sure that this important investigation work that's taken place by the authorities in the RCMP continues, and we're pleased to see that progress is being made on that cooperation, and that work continues. Thanks
so
so much.
You'll wait until the end of the case to resume talks with them? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that for Canadian businesses that are doing business there, for investors who are doing business there, they can continue to count on, on Canada, on the Trade Commissioner Service, on our work that takes place in India. And yes, this investigation is going on, but we're just going to, monitor this situation very closely and take it one step at a time.
But you're not at the table with them like you are with. You're not at the table with them, though.
Okay, thanks so much.
Conservateurs, il y a beaucoup moins d'appui pour l'Ukraine. D'un côté, on voit la position des conservateurs qui ont voté contre C-57. Est-ce que vous y voyez un lien? Est-ce qu'on peut faire un lien entre leur position sur C-57 et l'appui chez les électeurs conservateurs pour l'Ukraine qui diminue un peu? 43% des électeurs conservateurs disent qu'on appuie trop l'Ukraine.
Je pense que le sondage duquel tu parles démontre que la grande majorité des Canadiens appuient l'Ukraine et veulent que le gouvernement canadien appuie l'Ukraine. C'est la première chose. Et deuxièmement, je dirais que je pense, comme je t'ai dit avant, je pense que la raison que M. Poilievre et les conservateurs n'appuient pas l'Ukraine, c'est parce que leur parti, je pense, est très influencé par un mouvement MAGA américain, pro-MAGA américain, qui est en train d'influencer la politique des conservateurs. Je pense que c'est important qu'on continue à soutenir l'Ukraine, non seulement parce que c'est la bonne chose à faire, mais aussi parce que c'est dans nos intérêts comme Canadiens. Les Ukrainiens se battent pour leur sécurité, mais ils se battent aussi pour la nôtre.
Est-ce qu'on pourrait dire que c'est une question un peu de cadrage de l'enjeu Est-ce qu'on peut dire que c'est une question de cadrage de l'enjeu qui aurait fait vaciller peut-être l'appui des électeurs conservateurs vis-à-vis de l'Ukraine? Est-ce qu'il y a un cadrage de cet enjeu qui est particulier?
Je pense que c'est clair que ça me concerne que M. Poilievre continue de ne pas appuyer l'Ukraine, que son parti vote contre l'Ukraine, vote contre l'aide militaire, contre l'Operation Unifier pour la formation des Ukrainiens, contre l'accord de libre-échange qu'on vient de voter dessus ici. Et évidemment, les choses qu'il dit et ses positions, la position des conservateurs, des députés conservateurs, va avoir une influence sur la perspective des Canadiens.
Merci.
Je m'excuse. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Polls out about the war in Ukraine that show support, calls on party lines, support among conservative ridings is lower than Liberal, NDP, other ridings. Why do you think that is?
I don't know anything about the polling, but I would say that Canadians have an obligation to support Ukraine. I think it's really vital, and I would think that all members of Parliament would recognize the importance of Ukraine winning from a geopolitical standpoint. I mean, polling is one thing, doing the right thing is another thing. Supporting our allies, working with other governments is really important, and Canada needs to step up and play that role.
Comment ça se fait que les membres du cabinet ont autant de mal à nous dire ça?
Il y en a qui veulent pas ouvrir le débat. C'est pas le temps d'ouvrir le débat sur la monarchie au Canada. Alors, il y a quand même un certain malaise avec ouvrir le débat. Mais je pense pas que cette motion-ci, ça ouvre le débat parce que la façon que la motion, que je peux voir, donne l'option. Alors, si les gens veulent faire la segmentation roi, ils peuvent le faire. S'ils veulent faire la segmentation du Canada, ils peuvent le faire. Alors, ça n'ouvre pas le débat. Alors, les monarchistes au travail du pays, ils vont continuer de penser de la même façon. Puis, c'est des gens qui ne veulent pas le faire, vont avoir l'option avec la motion.
La Constitution est respectée, selon vous, dans la manière dont c'est présenté, tout ça?
Oui, d'après que je peux voir, je ne suis pas un avocat, mais d'après que je peux voir présentement, la Constitution n'a pas besoin d'être changée, la Constitution n'a pas besoin. Alors, M. Arsenault, je pense qu'il a quand même essayé de pivoter. Comme vous savez, au Canada, la Constitution, c'est quand même un sujet assez... j'ai vécu, comme vous, au niveau de Beach Lake, puis Charlottetown, puis mon père était député en 68. Alors, quand Pierre Trudeau était ici, alors la Constitution, c'est quelque chose qui quand même, ça chatouille un peu là, les politiciens, mais je pense pas que ça a un effet.
Et sur un autre sujet, la réforme du mode de scrutin, la motion du NPD d'avoir une assemblée citoyenne, une assemblée constituante sur la question, pensez-vous que c'est une bonne idée?
Oui, je pense que quand même avoir des citoyens qui regardent, oui, il y a eu quand même le débat en 2015, il y a eu un comité, il n'y avait aucun consensus du méthode, mais là, quand même, avoir un comité, puis des citoyens qui regardent, parce qu'il faut aussi regarder, il y a certaines démarches qu'on doit faire pour améliorer la participation. Alors, quand même, on parle de 60, 65, 68 %. Des fois, la municipalité, c'est comme 40 %. La province de l'Ontario, c'est à 43 %. C'est affreux. Alors, il faut trouver des façons d'améliorer. Je pense que d'avoir le dialogue de comment on peut augmenter la participation dans la démocratie, d'impliquer plus les jeunes. Ça va de 16 ans, peut-être qu'on devrait regarder 16 ans. Il faut trouver des façons, parce qu'il y a plus de gens qui vont participer. Puis je dis toujours aux gens, choisissez une voie, choisissez un parti, choisissez un endroit, puis participez dans la démocratie, participez dans votre communauté. C'est quelque chose que je pense qu'on ne fait pas assez. C'est pas juste une question de jeunes, les adultes aussi, au niveau de participer dans la communauté et de la citoyenneté.
Le vote est supposé avoir lieu demain après-midi. Avez-vous décidé à ce point-ci?
C'est ça que j'ai parlé avec le WIB, j'ai parlé avec M. Morris aussi, puis regarder l'ensemble. Alors, je vais prendre ma décision bientôt.
M. McKinnon suggérait que ça allait être un vote libre.
Oui, c'était mentionné. Alors, c'est un vote libre.
Vous n'avez pas pris votre décision finale?
Non.
Mais l'idée...
J'aime vraiment l'idée. Ah oui.
OK. Les libéraux ont l'air quand même assez... pas avoir tous la même opinion là-dessus.
C'est bon, c'est
tout à l'heure, on entendait... hier, on entendait durant le débat des libéraux être opposés. D'autres... Vous dites, c'est bien, il faut avoir le débat, puis c'est pas un mauvais moment. Non?
Oui, justement.
OK.
Ouais, c'est un bon moment.
Merci.
Ouais, merci beaucoup.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ça, vous, un index qui coûte 16 millions de dollars à faire?
Bien, premièrement, je me dis, comment ça se fait qu'on a besoin d'autant de traduction? Ces documents-là étaient tous en anglais dès le départ. Puis ensuite de ça, si on ne veut pas payer pour nos valeurs, ben c'est pas des vraies valeurs dans ce cas-là. 16 millions, ça m'apparaît beaucoup, mais c'est pas la première fois que les libéraux donnent des contrats de manière très, très généreuse. On a déjà vu ça dans le passé, mais c'est une question de principe. Si c'est ça que ça coûte, et je ne le sais pas si c'est ça que ça coûte, ça m'apparaît beaucoup, mais il faut le faire. C'est un droit parlementaire. Le français doit être respecté, défendu, sinon c'est juste un slogan.
On attend de voir, parce que, justement, on a eu des réactions des ministres du gouvernement libéral, pas du ministre des langues officielles, qui a décliné nos demandes d'entrevue.
Pourtant, dans sa description de tâche.
Et qui nous disent c'est inacceptable, mais en même temps, c'est pas clair ce que le gouvernement va faire avec ça. Comment est-ce que vous réagissez?
Bien, je pense que si le gouvernement est sérieux dans sa défense du français, puis dans le fait que les parlementaires peuvent travailler en français avec des documents qui sont bien traduits, mais il faut qu'ils aillent de l'avant, il faut qu'ils permettent... c'est une demande du comité en plus, alors il est lié à ça, non seulement il y a les langues officielles, non seulement il y a ses déclarations, mais en plus c'est une exigence du comité.
Donc il ne peut pas se cacher derrière un gros montant, c'est ça que vous dites?
Si on n'est pas prêt à payer pour nos valeurs, c'est pas des vraies valeurs.
Merci, M. Woodris.
Ça fait plaisir.